A living human heart pulses roughly once every second. Behind that continuous physical motion lies a sophisticated electromechanical engine. This engine relies on a sequence of precise pressure gradients to drive fluid through a closed circuit. Electrocardiograms provide a window into the system, but a single trace only captures the electrical impulses triggering the muscle. It offers no data on the physical movement of the blood itself. To accurately understand hemodynamics, the physical movement of blood, we must map electrical pacing, changing chamber volumes, and shifting pressure gradients onto a single timeline. Mastering cardiac physiology requires seeing how all these systems interact to produce a single heartbeat, a sequence that executes flawlessly in exactly 0.8 seconds. The Wiggers diagram serves as the central framework that unifies all cardiac data into one consolidated roadmap. The vertical axes track 3 distinct measurements simultaneously. We measure pressure in millimeters of mercury, blood volume in milliliters, and electrical activity in millivolts. The horizontal axis represents time. The entire width of this graph captures the events of just one single cardiac cycle. While this stack of intersecting lines is dense, every crossing point is driven by a single law of fluid dynamics. Fluid always flows from an area of higher pressure to an area of lower pressure. The Wiggers diagram provides a comprehensive map of how those pressure gradients actively open and close the heart's valves. This red trace tracks ventricular volume during the relaxation phase, known as diastole. The atrioventricular or mitral valve is open. Blood returning from the lungs flows through the atrium and directly into the ventricle. The volume curve climbs steadily as the chamber fills. This returning blood stretches the ventricular walls, a mechanical state called preload. Next, the sinoatrial node fires, forming the ECG's P wave and triggering atrial contraction. This atrial kick forces a final blood surge, pushing the volume curve to its peak, the end diastolic volume. The ventricle is now full. The muscle fibers are stretched to their optimal length, primed to generate maximum force. Preload provides the exact mechanical potential required for the high-pressure contraction that follows. The ECG spikes with the QRS complex, signaling the command for the ventricle to contract. The ventricular pressure trace enters the graph at the bottom. A delay at the AV node ensures the ventricle is completely full, before the electrical signal travels down the Purkinje fibers to trigger the muscle cells. As the ventricular muscle engages, internal pressure rises. The instant it exceeds the pressure in the atrium, the AV valve slams shut. The aortic valve is already closed, making the ventricle a completely sealed chamber. The muscle violently squeezes this trapped blood. This is isovolumic contraction. Because liquids are incompressible, the physical force of the contracting muscle translates into a massive pressure spike, shooting vertically up the axis. Observe the volume trace. During this pressure spike, it remains perfectly flat. No blood has left the chamber yet. The heart is generating the raw force required to break into the systemic circuit. To leave the heart, pressure must overcome afterload, the resting resistance of the systemic vascular system. We can track this resistance here. The aortic pressure trace maintains around 80 millimeters of mercury even during relaxation. The ventricle continues squeezing until its internal pressure exceeds aortic pressure. The gradient shifts, and the aortic valve flies open. This initiates the ejection phase. The ventricular volume trace plummets as blood is forced out of the heart and into the aorta. The ventricular and aortic pressure traces lap together, peaking at a systolic maximum of roughly 120 millimeters of mercury. Ejection is the mechanical result of the ventricle successfully overcoming systemic afterload. Systole ends at the T wave on the ECG. The ventricular muscle relaxes and its internal pressure drops rapidly. As ventricular pressure falls below aortic pressure, blood attempts to flow backward. It catches the aortic valve leaflets, snapping them shut and creating the dicrotic notch blip on the trace. The total stroke volume of oxygen-rich blood has now been successfully ejected deeply into the vascular tree. This chart tracks the ejected blood's pressure through systemic circulation. On the left, high pulse pressure rocks the aorta and large arteries. Moving into the arterioles and capillaries, the mean arterial pressure steeply drops. Vascular resistance dissipates the energy, driving pressure towards zero. Because systemic circulation exhausts this pressure, returning blood has no driving force. The heart must build new gradients. Re-examine the complete Wiggers diagram. These overlapping lines represent a continuous, repeating loop of electromechanical events. The electrical signal fires, the volume fills, the pressure builds, the valves open, the cycle resets. It all comes down to the foundational equation of hemodynamics. Flow equals the change in pressure divided by resistance. The heart maintains this flow by constantly balancing the incoming preload volume against the outgoing afterload resistance. It does this 70 to 75 times every single minute. It is a violent, relentless mechanical workload. Without this precise sequence of electrical delays and pressure gradients, tissue perfusion stops instantly. Human life support is a biological engine bound strictly by laws of physics, and every aspect of that engine is mapped perfectly, right here on the Wiggers diagram.